You're not just distracted, you're wasting the life you were meant to live. You keep telling yourself it's just distraction, that you'll focus later, that you'll catch up eventually. But if you're being honest, you know something deeper is happening. You're not just losing focus, you're slowly losing connection with the life you meant to live. There's a particular kind of mental fatigue that doesn't come from doing too much, but from being constantly pulled away from what matters. From splitting your attention into fragments all day long. From switching between tabs, notifications, thoughts, and impulses, until the thread of intention completely disappears. You sit down to do one thing, but end up doing 5. You promise yourself you'll start, but somehow the day escapes. You're always surrounded by motion, but rarely experiencing movement. And when you pause to reflect, there's this quiet ache, like you've been everywhere and nowhere at the same time. And yet, you normalize it. You blame yourself for being bad at focus. You tell yourself you just need better habits, more structure, maybe another productivity tool. But deep down, you feel it. Your mind is slipping further away from clarity. Your sense of direction is getting dimmer. And worst of all, you're starting to forget what it even feels like to be fully present inside your own life. This isn't just about attention. It's about identity. Because the more you live in a state of mental interruption, the harder it becomes to feel connected to anything: your goals, your values, your sense of self. You start drifting, not just through your day, but through your own potential. Quietly, passively. Like a version of you is fading in the background, while another one, anxious, scattered, overstimulated, takes over. You're not just wasting time. You're losing access to the part of you that can choose, that can think clearly, act deliberately, and build something real. Distraction has a cost, not just in hours lost, but in the erosion of self. Because the longer you live disconnected from intention, the harder it becomes to believe in your ability to follow through, to stay with discomfort, to live from clarity. But here's the truth. You're not broken. You're conditioned. And what's been trained into you can be trained out of you. Let's begin with where that conditioning starts. Not with your schedule, but with your nervous system. You don't wake up in the morning deciding to waste your attention. You don't plan to spend your energy on meaningless loops. But somehow, by the end of the day, it's happened again, and again, and again. That feeling of having lived the day on the surface, constantly pulled in 100 directions, without really being anywhere, is not just frustrating. It's mentally draining, and quietly destructive. You'll tell yourself it's just a bad habit, that tomorrow you'll be better. But here's what's actually happening beneath the surface. Your brain has been conditioned to escape effort, not because you're weak, but because your nervous system has learned to avoid the discomfort of being present, especially when what's in front of you requires real engagement. Focus, after all, isn't neutral. It demands something from you. Commitment, vulnerability, direction. So when those things feel heavy or uncertain, your mind looks for an exit. That exit often looks like something harmless. You check your messages. You open another tab. You do a quick task that gives you a sense of productivity, but none of it is the thing you actually set out to do. Your brain gets a hit of relief, and in that moment, it learns. This is safer than staying with what's hard. This is how a pattern forms, one that's invisible at first, but deeply consistent. You start avoiding anything that triggers effort, tension, or doubt, and because your brain values comfort, it rewards that avoidance. You feel less pressure, temporarily, but over time, you also feel less capable, less clear. The result? You begin to drift. Not because you want to, but because distraction has become the path of least resistance, and your brain is built to choose that path, unless it has a compelling reason not to. And here's the deeper danger. The more you escape discomfort, the more you teach your brain that presence itself is threatening, that real engagement is too much, that silence is unsafe. So even when you want to be present, your mind runes, not because it doesn't care, but because it's been trained to associate focus with pain and distraction with safety. This is the invisible loop. not just of distraction, but of emotional avoidance, masked as productivity. It's not just about what you're doing, it's about what you're escaping. And until that pattern is seen clearly, it can't be changed. But now, you're seeing it. And that's where change begins. Your brain isn't wired for modern life, it's wired for survival, which means it naturally prioritizes anything that feels urgent, novel, or emotionally stimulating, whether or not it's meaningful. That's where dopamine comes in. Most people think dopamine is about pleasure, but that's a misconception. Dopamine is actually about motivation. It drives you toward what your brain believes will offer reward or relief. And over time that system becomes biased toward what's fast, easy, and always available. So when you get a notification, your brain doesn't evaluate its importance. It distracts. When you open your feed and scroll, your brain isn't making a conscious choice. It's following a loop. Anticipation, reward, repeat. That loop trains your brain to crave stimulation, not fulfillment. The more you engage with fragmented, low-effort content, the more your dopamine system adapts to expect that kind of input. It's not just a habit. It's a neural rewiring. Focus starts to feel like a burden. Stillness becomes intolerable. Deep thinking feels like too much. And without even noticing, your brain starts rejecting the very conditions that support growth, clarity, and direction. That's why you feel restless. Why even on a quiet day, your mind keeps reaching for something, anything, to interrupt the silence. Your brain has become conditioned to chase stimulation, not satisfaction. And it's not just social media. It's everything designed to give you quick emotional payoff without real engagement. Task switching, notifications, ambient noise, even endless planning without action. This dopamine disruption hijacks your internal compass. You start chasing what feels good now, instead of what brings meaning over time. But here's the cost. As your brain adapts to noise, it loses sensitivity to signal. You begin to lose interest in the very things that once gave your life depth because they don't hit hard enough, fast enough, often enough. This is how a mind that once craved growth becomes a mind that avoids it, not because you've changed as a person, but because your brain has adapted to its environment. And this is the turning point. If your brain can be trained into that pattern, it can also be trained out of it. This isn't just about losing focus. It's about losing direction, slowly, subtly, and often without realizing it. Every time your attention breaks, something small slips out of alignment. You begin the day with a sense of purpose, or at least the intention to move forward. But the interruptions start early. A message here, a scroll there, a shift in mental state, and before long, the thread that connects your actions to your inner compass is gone. You stay busy, of course. You answer emails, switch tasks, respond quickly, shuffle things around. But by the end of the day, you feel strangely hollow, like you spent all your energy doing, but you didn't actually move. That's the signature of directionless momentum, a life spent in reaction, not creation. And the more this happens, the more it shapes how you see yourself. You begin to think of yourself as someone who's always behind, someone who can't follow through, someone who's too distracted to make real progress. But this isn't who you are. It's the identity that forms when you live without continuity, when your attention becomes too fragmented to carry forward your deeper intentions. The real tragedy of distraction isn't just lost time. It's that you begin to lose your sense of who you are when you're truly engaged, when you're immersed, when you're actually living from a place of intention instead of constantly being pulled by impulse. This disconnect isn't random. It's learned. Your brain has adapted to a pace, a rhythm, and a way of functioning that rewards interruption and punishes presence. That makes the urgent feel more important than the meaningful. That makes everything loud and fast feel more real than the quiet truth waiting inside you. And so, you begin to confuse motion with direction. You feel busy, but you're not progressing. You feel stimulated, but not satisfied. You feel exhausted, but not fulfilled. That's not because you lack drive. It's because the systems that guide your focus have been hijacked. But here's the turning point. Your sense of direction isn't gone. It's just buried. buried beneath layers of reactivity, overthinking, avoidance, and noise. And every time you slow down, not just to pause, but to reflect, you uncover it again. Reclaiming your direction doesn't require you to be perfect. It requires you to be present. Even briefly, because the path back to clarity isn't made of massive changes. It's made of small, consistent moments where you choose to reconnect. Your days are full. There's barely a pause between tasks. You move from screen to screen, thought to thought, demand to demand. And yet, at the end of it all, there's a strange emptiness. A sense that nothing real got done. That for all the motion, nothing truly moved. That feeling isn't irrational. It's a neurological pattern. Your brain is being stimulated, but not meaningfully directed. And the result is a kind of cognitive illusion. The illusion of momentum. You feel active, engaged, constantly doing, but none of it builds towards something that matters to you. It's activity without alignment. This happens because your brain rewards completion, regardless of significance. Checking boxes, replying quickly, clearing notifications, they all give you micro-releases of dopamine. And your brain learns, this feels productive. Let's repeat it. But the problem is that these low-effort, high-frequency tasks rarely align with your deeper goals. They give you the sensation of progress, but they don't move the needle of your life. And over time, they become your mental baseline, crowding out the space you need for clarity, strategy, and creation. You start to live in response mode, always catching up, always reacting, and the deeper part of you, the part that holds your long-term vision, your sense of purpose, your creative insight, gets sidelined. Not intentionally, just gradually, silently. You trade reflection for reaction, direction for speed. This illusion of momentum is one of the most dangerous mental traps because it feels like progress, but it drains your capacity to make real progress. It convinces you that presence can wait. That depth is optional. That busyness is enough. But when you pause, when you ask, what did I actually move forward today? You begin to see the truth. Motion isn't the same as growth. Constant stimulation isn't the same as fulfillment. Finishing tasks isn't the same as living from intention. Breaking this illusion starts with honesty, naming the loop. Recognizing that feeling busy doesn't mean you're aligned. That being overwhelmed doesn't mean you're doing something valuable. That urgency doesn't equal importance. And it means giving yourself permission to slow down, not as a retreat, but as a strategic return. To ask deeper questions, to look at the day ahead, and decide not react. To act from center, not from pressure. Because the truth is, real progress feels different. It's not loud. It's not chaotic. It doesn't scream for your attention. It builds slowly, quietly, through small decisions made from clarity. And every time you choose that kind of movement, grounded, deliberate, honest, you reclaim the momentum that actually leads somewhere. You've probably tried to fix this the way most people do, by trying harder. You make a list. You delete an app. You set new goals and promise yourself that this time you'll stay focused. For a few hours, maybe even a few days, it works. But eventually, the old pattern returns. You drift, you slip, and you blame yourself for lacking discipline. But the issue isn't discipline. It's design. Willpower alone can't hold your attention when your brain has been trained over months or even years to prefer stimulation over structure. Every time you scroll instead of starting, every time you jump between tasks instead of finishing one, your brain is learning. And what it learns is this: attention is optional. Escape is rewarding. Willpower burns out quickly when it's used as a defense mechanism against systems that are engineered to exploit your attention. And when that willpower inevitably fails, what takes its place is shame. The kind that makes you feel broken, lazy, or fundamentally incapable. But none of that is true. You're not broken. You're reacting exactly as a well-wired brain would in a poorly designed environment. The problem isn't that you're failing to resist distraction. It's that distraction has been given every advantage, and meaning has been stripped of urgency. Because, here's the truth, your brain doesn't stay engaged with what's meaningful unless it also feels immediate. If there's no emotional signal that says this matters now, your mind will default to the next easiest thing. That's not a flaw. That's efficiency. This is why trying harder doesn't work. Because effort without emotional relevance collapses under pressure. You can force yourself to focus for a while, but unless your brain feels a real, grounded reason to care, the pull toward distraction will always return. What works instead is redesigning how your brain responds to what matters. You start by asking, is this connected to something I value deeply, or is it just something I feel obligated to do? Am I clear on why this matters today, or have I buried that reason beneath noise and urgency? Is my environment reinforcing focus or constantly triggering escape? This is not about hacking your brain. It's about respecting it, understanding that attention isn't a moral issue, it's a biological function. And when you build your days with that in mind, something shifts. You stop fighting distraction like an enemy and start guiding attention like a resource. You begin to design a life that supports your mind, not one that constantly drains it. The ability to focus isn't a trait you're born with or a skill you magically unlock. It's a system you build. One decision at a time, one pattern at a time. And it begins not by forcing yourself to concentrate, but by rebuilding the architecture of attention from the inside out. Think of your brain like a landscape. If there's no clear path, your thoughts will wander. They'll take the easiest route, the one with the least resistance. And in today's world, that route is always paved with interruption. Messages, tabs, scrolling, mental noise. So the key isn't to resist the pull. The key is to carve out a stronger path, one your brain naturally starts to follow. You do this through three things: target, structure, and emotional relevance. Target means clarity. Your brain needs a clear signal. Work on your project is vague. Spend 45 minutes outlining the main argument gives your brain something to hold. Vague tasks blur your attention. Specific targets sharpen it. Structure means containment. Focus doesn't happen in an open field. It happens inside boundaries. That can be a block of time, a physical space, a defined start and end. When your brain knows where focus begins and where it ends, it stops trying to escape through mental side doors. And then there's emotional relevance, the most important and most neglected part. Your brain doesn't stay engaged with something just because it's logical. It stays engaged when something feels real, when it's tied to identity, growth, contribution, or meaning. If your focus is constantly slipping, chances are you've lost contact with why the task matters, not just in theory, but in your gut. The fix isn't more pressure, it's reconnection, bringing the reason back into the room. Asking yourself, with honesty, does this align with who I want to become? Does this reflect the life I'm trying to build? Can I make the stakes visible, not abstract? Once you do that, focus becomes less of a struggle. Not effortless, but no longer your attention stops being something you fight for and starts becoming something you return to. Something that belongs to you again. And to support that return, you have to shape your environment accordingly. Create friction for the habits that pull you away. Add structure where your brain tends to scatter. Eliminate decisions that drain your clarity. And reinforce, daily, what matters not through slogans or pressure, but through alignment. Because focus isn't about removing noise. It's about amplifying meaning. And when you give your brain something real to follow, it will follow it even through discomfort. Most people think of focus as a mental issue, but it's also environmental, biological, rhythmic. If your days are structured in ways that constantly drain your attention through noise, clutter, friction, overstimulation, then even the best mental strategies will fail under pressure. Your brain doesn't operate in isolation. It responds to light, sound, space, posture, timing, and even temperature. It tracks patterns long before you're consciously aware of them. And when your environment signals chaos, urgency, or endless novelty, your nervous system responds with fragmentation. So, if you want to rebuild focus, you don't start with more willpower. You start by shaping your day around attention recovery. Not just protection from distraction, but active restoration of your capacity to stay present. Start with light. Your circadian rhythm, the internal clock that governs energy, clarity, and mood, is deeply regulated by light exposure. Getting natural light early in the day, even for a few minutes, triggers a cascade of neurochemical responses that improve alertness and focus. Screens don't do this. Indoor lighting doesn't either. If your morning starts in the dark, your brain stays foggy far longer than you realize. Then look at sound. Your auditory environment has a direct effect on mental clarity. Constant, low-level noise, background conversations, or digital interruptions create cognitive load, forcing your brain to allocate energy just to filter them out. But a quiet environment, or one shaped by intentional sound like ambient focus audio, reduces that load and frees up space for sustained attention. Now, consider space and friction. Does your environment invite attention or sabotage it? Are your tools visible and ready, or hidden and scattered? Do you start the day deciding where to work and what to do? Or is that already defined for you? Every small point of decision drains mental energy. And when your setup is vague or inconsistent, your brain burns clarity, just trying to orient. Even physical posture plays a role. Slouched positions reduce alertness by signaling rest to the body. Movement, standing breaks, or postures that promote upright, grounded positioning signal activation to your nervous system. It's not about being rigid. It's about being aware of how your body reinforces your mind. And then, perhaps most importantly, look at your transitions. Most people carry their mental residue from one task into the next. They never fully shift, which means they never fully focus. Building brief rituals between blocks, a breath, a stretch, a change in environment, signals to the brain, we're shifting. That's how you reset your mental channel and avoid the buildup of cognitive smog. None of this is complicated, but it's essential. Because without a design that protects and restores attention, you're forcing your brain to fight battles it can't win. The goal is not to engineer the perfect day. It's to create conditions that support clarity so that focus becomes sustainable, not fragile. And once your environment begins to serve your mind, you'll notice something. The mental fog starts to lift. Your thoughts slow down. You feel more anchored, less reactive. Not because you became a different person, but because your brain finally has space to be itself. Presence is not a performance. It's a return to clarity, to awareness, to the quiet place inside you that hasn't been corrupted by urgency or noise. And the only way to rebuild your capacity for deep focus is to train your brain to value presence again. Right now, your attention is being shaped by repetition. Every moment you spend reacting trains your brain to expect interruption. Every time you multitask, switch tasks, or reach for your phone without thinking, your mind is learning. This is what we do when we feel friction. And so, the friction increases. Focus becomes harder. Silence feels unbearable. Stillness becomes threatening. But the same mechanism that trained your brain to seek distraction can be used to rewire it toward stillness. It starts small. No hacks, no complex systems. Just 5 minutes a day. 5 minutes where you choose to fully inhabit whatever you're doing. No switching, no background stimulation, no escaping. Drink water and taste it. Breathe and feel it. Read and absorb it. Write and mean it. Don't add more noise, reduce it. What matters is not the task itself, but how fully you meet it. This practice isn't about productivity. It's about restoration. You're reminding your nervous system that presence is not a threat, it's a resource. That stillness isn't emptiness. It's awareness. And the more you repeat it, the more your brain begins to crave what it used to avoid. Over time, your prefrontal cortex, The region responsible for conscious direction, decision-making, and sustained focus becomes more active. You regain control over what you attend to. You begin to pause more often before reacting, and slowly, your inner state becomes less dictated by external noise. But there's another layer: emotion. Because often, what pulls us out of presence isn't just habit, it's discomfort. The fear of not being enough, the pressure to perform, the unease of slowing down and feeling what's underneath the busyness. This is where practical philosophy comes in. You don't need to quote ancient wisdom, but you can start seeing discomfort not as something to avoid, but as something to stand in, to observe, to learn from, to remain grounded through. That's resilience, not fighting your feelings, but choosing not to be directed by them. Training your brain to value presence isn't just a cognitive exercise. It's an emotional transformation. It's a return to a mind that can stay even when it's hard, even when the world is screaming for your attention, even when everything in you wants to run. And with every return, you reclaim something essential: the ability to live on purpose, to choose not just what you do, but who you are while doing it. Distraction doesn't just break your focus, it breaks your rhythm. It fragments the natural pace at which your mind works best. And once that rhythm is lost, it becomes almost impossible to sustain direction. You start drifting, not because you lack goals, but because your internal timing has been thrown off. Your brain, like your body, thrives on rhythm, not just schedules, but patterns of energy, tension, and recovery. There are moments when you're most alert and moments when you need to pause. There are mental beats to your day, and when you ignore them, everything starts to feel either rushed or dull, either too much or too empty. Modern life has flattened those rhythms. You're pushed to be on all the time, constant input, no real recovery. But the mind isn't built for that. Without rhythm, attention starts to decay. You might still be working, but you're no longer present. You're no longer directed. You're just going through the motions, trying to keep up. So, how do you rebuild rhythm? First, observe your natural cycles. When do you feel clearest? When do you tend to drift? Instead of fighting those waves, start working with them. Place your most demanding tasks in windows of high alertness. Use the natural dips for reflection, recovery, or low-intensity work. Stop treating every hour as equal. They're not. Second, introduce micro-anchors throughout your day. Small actions that reconnect you to presence. A conscious breath before starting. A moment of silence after finishing. A pause to stretch, to notice, to reset. These transitions may seem minor, but they restore rhythm. They create mental punctuation in a sentence that would otherwise run on endlessly. Third, protect your mental entry and exit points. How you start and end your day has an outsized impact on your sense of control. If you begin the day in reaction, checking notifications, answering others' needs, you enter someone else's rhythm. If you end the day in stimulation, scrolling, binging, overstimulating, your brain doesn't get closure. It carries that residue into the next day. You don't need to overhaul your life, but you do need to create loops you can complete. A loop of presence, a loop of thought, a loop of effort and recovery. That's what rhythm is. Not rigidity, but return. The more you return to your rhythm, the more stable you feel, the more grounded your choices become, and the less likely you are to chase noise out of habit, because you've built something internally that feels real, something that sustains itself without drama, something that feels like you. And that's the shift. From drifting through your days, constantly catching up, to moving with awareness, pacing yourself from the inside out. That's not just a productivity upgrade. It's a psychological reset. You stop living on borrowed time and start living on your own terms. Every time you return to presence, even for a few seconds, you are reshaping your brain. You're reactivating the part of you that knows how to choose, not react. The part that knows how to pause, not flee. The part that remembers who you are when you're not being pulled in every direction. This isn't about getting everything right. It's about building a different relationship with your mind. One that's based on clarity instead of chaos, direction instead of drift, stillness instead of panic. And that begins with small, consistent returns. Return to your breath when the noise gets too loud. Return to your task when your mind tries to escape. Return to your intention when you feel the pull to numb. Return to your values when you're tempted to react out of fear. Each return matters, not because it's impressive, but because it's foundational. Each one is a vote for the life you want to build, the self you want to inhabit, the direction you want to embody. You're not trying to become someone else. You're remembering who you were before the overstimulation, the mental fragmentation, the learned helplessness. You're coming back to a version of yourself that's been there all along, waiting for space, for stillness, for presence. And that presence is available to you now. Not after a reset. Not after you're more disciplined. Not after you've fixed everything. Now, with this breath, with this decision, with this moment, you're not just distracted. You're human, living in a world that profits from your disconnection. But you're not powerless. You have something stronger than algorithms and noise. The ability to pause, to observe, and to choose again. Let that be your baseline. Let that be your power. You're not just distracted, you're ready to wake up.